I was known as the guy who would always drum on the tables. I'm the kind of person who can go to a live show and I can tell you that the PA system is not aligned. We have normalized ignorance. See, it is one of the few sectors where people wear ignorance as a badge of honor. If practitioners in the sector do not have a concerted effort with knowing ABC are wrong and why they are wrong, they can't find ways of fixing it. We have an obsession with the idea of success, but not success.
Kofi Boachie Ansah, aka BEAT MENACE.
Yes, sir.
It's good to have you in the house, bro.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
At what point did you decide to become like a producer or be actively involved in the music space?
By the time I was in primary school, I was known as the guy who would always drum on the tables at home or in school whenever a teacher was in class, and people will just gather around, sing, make music. So I always made music in some way or form, and by the time I got to junior high school, the end of junior high school, I and a group of friends came together to form a rap group, and back then finding just free beats on the internet wasn't a thing yet because the internet wasn't as democratized as it is today. So, you would have albums from artists where, maybe the last track on the cassette or the CD or whatever would have an instrumental track and we will sing along to that or we'll drum on the tables. But when we started rapping, wanted to make original music as much as we could. So, I took my background of having learned to play instruments to a certain degree when I was very young. My first instruments were the drums naturally. And then, I gravitated towards other instruments. And drumming on the table to recording on a cassette tape recorder. And a friend of mine, I think he went on vacation to London. I think his mom bought him a Yamaha keyboard that you could program beats on. And so I just had to learn how to, make beats on that before gradually moving to a computer. And that's how it started. So it was mainly as a hobby and as a favorite pastime and just discovering that we could get ideas that way in our heads into a tangible form to spread, amongst our friends and just have fun. I guess that's how it started. And at some point I was like, how can I improve on this skill set? And it just opened Pandora's box. And here we are today.
I'm sure you've worked with a lot of musicians.
I have. I've been blessed to have met a lot of creative people in the music, not just musicians, but other people who are critically or equally important, in the music value chain. And I've met some legends. I've met and worked with people people may never get to know. And it's just been one hell of an experience, because you pick bits and pieces from different ideologies, different influences, workflows, and so on and so forth. And I'm a lover of music. Okay, I do not discriminate against various styles of music because I'm a collector as well, so I'm equal student and practitioner. And it's a never-ending journey. So I've worked with a lot of big names, some unknown artists, people who have had tremendous success, people who may never ever get known, but who are equally as brilliant, and it's been rewarding, I must say.
Do you want to mention some names?
Oh, it's a long list in various capacities. What names come to mind? The late great Tony Allen, the inventor of Afrobeat with Fela, the drummer, the legendary drummer. Abel Taylor, the late Kojo Donko, in my opinion, who is like one of the greatest composer, arrangers, of African music or just music period, who just so happen to have come from Africa. I've worked with some members of the legendary Osibisa band, in various capacities. My big brother Sway, British artist of Ghanaian descent.
I mean, one of the recent that I know of is Santrophy band.
Yeah, Santrophy.
I think
yes.
you recorded an album. You
Founding member, actually. Co-executive produced, engineered, legal brand strategy, that sort of thing, the early, at least for the debut album. They have a new album out, I think it's out now.
Okay.
Yeah. So Santrophy is just one of several, outfits I've worked with.
You said you're a collector as well. What do you mean by that?
So the thing about me is I get bored easily. If I keep listening to the same song over and over, unless I'm doing it for critical listening purposes, maybe to try and understand why the music arrangement took a certain shape or form, or that sort of thing, or trying to understand the sensibilities that may have inspired the writer to express their musical idea in a very specific manner. Generally speaking, I just usually would get bored. So I just started collecting a lot of music from an early age in all sorts of formats. So I have music from maybe 1920s to literally stuff that may have been released just last month.
Wow.
So it's
a huge collection.
Yes, a huge collection of music.
I see that you don't just produce, but you work with artists in different capacities.
I guess the easiest way to describe what I do musically is informed by the fact that I've had a pretty long time, of venturing or experimenting musically in various capacities. So I'm an end-to-end person. I'm an engineer, studio, live, broadcast, all of that. I compose, I arrange as well. I write, I produce, depending on what's needed. So it's hard to quantify my approach because every scenario is somewhat different. So on certain projects, I may come on strictly as an engineer. On certain projects, I might contribute to the writing or the composition or both. In certain capacities, the artists are getting ready to go on tour, and then it's my responsibility to come up with a checklist of what needs to be done. What does the technical writer look like? What does the hospitality writer look like? I'm the kind of person who can go to a live show and I can tell you that the PA system is not aligned, or the E string of the rhythm guitar is out of tune. You know what I mean? And so sometimes it can be a lot of pressure because especially in our part of the world where a lot of people may not necessarily have formal training for some of these things. And don't get me wrong, some of the best practitioners may not have had formal training, but they were nurtured in a system where people really knew what they were doing and they were not just working blindly. So it's a lot of pressure for me sometimes because I might be tasked to perform a series of duties or activities, and sometimes there might be the need for me to overstep beyond that to ensure that we create the best product possible. The mystery of what we do is anything you create is the sum of the weakest parts in the chain. So you can have an amazing vocalist who sings, who has lovely vocals on a song that is badly produced or badly recorded.
What is the major change or transformation do you think the industry or sector needs?
I think mindset. We need a mindset change first because I believe the mind is powerful. Wherever the mind is, the body and your reality follows or reflects. So some of the things, we can get all technical, we can be whiny about the details and the nitty-gritties of what isn't working. But if practitioners in the sector do not have a concerted effort with knowing ABC are wrong and why they are wrong, they can't find ways of fixing it. The problem is a mindset thing first. So to fix that problem, you can't skip behavioral change. And I'm not saying this as a sleight of tongue either. I stand by everything I say here. That the average Ghanaian is obsessed with looking successful, or we have an obsession with the idea of success, but not success. On the surface, the two might look or sound the same, but they are very distinct concepts entirely. Okay? So if I see an artist who has a lot of potential, and I say we can do ABCD, but before that, you have to do ABCD to get to a point where you get to a point where you get to a point where your definition of success as an artist is finally achieved. But that person doesn't go through the process, although they have agreed in principle. But the necessary things that need to be done so that that becomes a reality, they refuse to do. Then it means the person likes the idea of it, but not that thing itself.
They like the glory, but they don't want to do the work.
Yes, I mean, because I've met hundreds of artists who want to be that successful person who has like the fleet of Rolls Royce, they have their house at the beach, they are so commercially successful. I mean, success is relative, right? To everybody. But when they are picking Trotsky to the studio, or they can barely even afford it, they want to convince you that their first music video, you go and hire a Rolls Royce. I think that's problematic. It's a warped way of thinking. That way of thinking is so normalized in our society that we do not see a problem with it, but there's something wrong with it. Okay, so I think reorienting a lot of our ideologies will be a start. And I think it's also intrinsically linked to our culture and language. We don't understand our language. We don't really understand our culture. Because an average Ghanaian person might be raised in a Ghanaian household where they speak Ewe, they speak Twi, Hausa, Dagomba, you understand what I mean? Dagati, whatever. But you know, they mean say they understand the language. Because African languages go way beyond just communication and the spoken word. Okay, they have encoded historical lessons, philosophical lessons that were developed and optimized over time as part of the lived experiences of the people who came before us. So when you don't understand those things, it will affect your reality. I wasn't raised to speak. My parents are both Akans. My mom is Fanti, my dad is Bono. But we weren't raised to speak any Ghanaian language. And we moved to Ghana at a certain point in time. And my parents now felt the pressure because it seemed as if all of a sudden they had a wake-up call that, hey, we should have done better. And so, Charlie, you close from school at 2 p.m. You have a 1-hour break. I'll go to 3 classes from 4 to 7 p.m.
You actually went to 3 classes.
Even today, I write 3 better than I speak it. But that taught me something very interesting. And there was that race, like moving to Ghana in 2 years, you now had to write your BEC exams or whatever. And you'd have to write an essay in 3. So having an analytical mind, I started questioning a lot of things, but that also opened Pandora's box because I had a short window within which to learn, understand the language and write it. I started understanding the language in ways that perhaps maybe the average Ghanaian could have taken for granted. Okay? In Twi, if somebody is hyperventilating, somebody is mad, somebody is really annoyed, Nana to boase. In English, the history of how phrases and words are coined together is called etymology. So you can trace individual words that become synthesized to form new words to describe a particular situation or instance. Tuwubo asi. There's a certain level of suppression. Is in visual terms, think about maybe a pot of some liquid that is boiling, about to spill over. If you subdue them, if you suppress them, Charlie, chill. Tuwubo asi. It's very poetic if you think about it. And if you have to write that level of poetry in English, Charlie, if you learn construction, composition, syntax, conjugation, it's crazy. I think we don't respect our languages enough, and it has affected our reality also. So I think part of the problems we experience is we need to take a journey back to self. We need to understand who we are as a people and our position in this place and time. And a lot of sensible, sustainable solutions will begin to come to us.
Let's come to awards.
In SMP. Yes,
SMP.
awards. Yes.
Awards.
Awards.
I mean, you are on the Ghana Music Awards board.
How did you know?
Okay, so is this something that people should know?
No, I think it's indifferent. It's not something that I've spoken about. And I'm a relatively new member. I think, just a few years. 3-4 years, I think.
How has it been to be on there? Because, Ghana Music Awards is the biggest music award scheme in Ghana. I mean,
absolutely.
No two ways about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Does it come with a lot of pressure?
I think it does. Now you've mentioned it here, I wouldn't be shocked if people reach out. I mean, a number of people have reached out over the years, and I just didn't know how they found out. But yes, it's a lot of pressure because people think they can convince you that they deserve something, but the board doesn't work that way, And as an open critic of the scheme, even prior to my joining, I just developed a newfound respect for everybody on the board. There are some amazing people on there. Certain persons you might not necessarily, align with their views, but they break down why something is the way the way it is, and you have no choice but to respect them. We fail to realize that the award scheme has been the most consistent thing that has happened. This will be the 26th year, I believe, in the music sector in Ghana. I don't know anything that has lasted as long. And those guys have to be seen for what they've done. Their contribution to the space. They have the Lifetime Achievements Awards and all of these things. And prior to that, there was no such thing. For a long time, unfortunately. We had the ACRAG Awards years ago, but I mean, that ceased to exist, I think, in the late 90s or whatever. And you need to understand that in a space where the government have zero incentives for creatives to have a scheme that runs regardless of challenges consistently for 26 years, what and all, flaws or no flaws, Charlie, you have to respect them. There's also a thing to be said that we do have a lot of challenges in the sector. And a lot of those challenges would reflect or affect the way the scheme also does stuff. I've seen people whining. Yeah, we don't have enough female representation. It's not the problem of the award scheme. Whatever shortcomings we have in the sector will ultimately reflect in the awards. Charlie, they are seasoned professionals who form part of the board and the academy. And if something is said to be high life and is out there and people contest it, they have to go back to school. I mentioned something that culture is dynamic. There was a time our own legendary, may his soul rest in peace, Nana Mpedu, received a lot of slack from the older musicians who came before him because they did not consider the guitar band high life he was playing in the 70s as high life music. It was alien to them, although it had all the rhythmic and melodic inflections that would typically be defined as high life. So we need to be informed about certain elements that are indistinctively considered high life. And once it's captured in a newer form of expression, it can be categorized as high life. The drum, the backing rhythm that defines a lot of Afro beats in the early to mid 2000s would have been considered reggaeton. Do you believe me? Think about it. Think about it. A lot of the reggaeton at the time, if you went to the mid to early 90s, would have been considered raga. It is the other elements that are added to it that make it what it is. Let's talk about gospel music, or what we call gospel. As a genre of music, gospel music is mostly about the content. Asema wokano, asema wokan or enyumneso. If you think about it, if a lot of gospel artists were true to themselves, a lot of the music that we hear and we just call gospel, we'll call it by its actual proper genre. Reggae, and a majority of it is high life music. It is what it is. Earlier on, I said one of the biggest problems we have in the sector is, a lapse in thought leadership. In Semnibini, we have normalized ignorance. See, it is one of the few sectors where people wear ignorance as a badge of honor, and we don't realize it.
I think it's more of people not understanding the technical definition of the category.
I believe so too, but I think Charterhouse have done a pretty decent job, because I've overheard or watched a few media appearances, and I'm not really in touch like that with their PROs over the years to try throw some light or to better explain to the public why certain things are done or why they quantify specific categories in specific ways. I think people just don't listen.
Or read,
exactly. Because I believe on the website, all those things are, at least there's a summary that, better communicates why certain categories are what they are and so on and so forth.
It is not easy.
I just developed a newfound respect for everybody on that board and the scheme in general when I got to be a part of it, because it's easy to criticize on the sidelines. When you get in there and you see how hot the fire is, Charlie, no easy. And to do it for what, 25, 26 years?
Plenty work.
Charlie, I believe there's a Christian phrase for it. They call it long suffering. In fact, I think the award scheme has been one of the few things that is giving a certain semblance of a system. Because I know because of the clout they've built over, due to the consistency and, it's like you said, it's the most important scheme, right?
Yeah.
It informs what people do to the build-up with the hopes that they might get nominated and hopefully they might win. So think about the fact that if the TGMAs never existed, or 3Music didn't exist, 3Music Awards, right? Mm-hmm. And the other award schemes that people are trying, you can clearly see that people struggle.
Yeah.
It's not a walk in the park. Imagine what the sector would look like. It's a hard pill to swallow. Some of these things might not be as obvious, but when you think about it, you'd realize that, Charlie, certain people need support. They were one of the few platforms that also had the annual music business dialogue. Music industry dialogue, where they call stakeholders, to just have a tete-a-tete to meet people like members of the general public to see how we can grow the ecosystem, so to speak. A lot hasn't changed as a result, but that's a start. Then over the years, there's also a very deliberate attempt to try and democratize the award because of how big and how respected the outfit has become, where they take the nomination event to a different region. It is one of the few instances in Ghana, not even outside the world of entertainment, where there's a deliberate attempt to decentralize certain operations.
I think even apart from the nomination event, they do concerts in the other regions leading to the main awards night.
Yes. So even if you think about, let's forget about even entertainment just for a split second. Even when it comes to governance, you realize that you don't have many things happening outside the capital.
That's true.
It's so easy to overlook some of these seemingly less important details. But Charlie, they here. And that's, I think, one of several attempts to try and bridge the gap between the various segmented music scenes we have in the country. Fancy Gadam was filling up huge venues and stadia up north before people in Accra ever heard of him. And he came to Accra to sell out Bukom Boxing Arena and the National Theatre at least twice. That's crazy. So even the music space, the music sector is very fragmented. You understand?
Yes.
So it might be very difficult for you to know who the hottest person in Tadi is until they're on a hit record with somebody who has airplay across the country, or he come do something for Accra. Then you go see, nah, Charlie, some crazy guy from Tadi, day way he get fired. That's a problem. But that tells you that there's a certain level of work that needs to be done.
Let's talk about your Grammy nomination. Tell me about it.
So I contributed to a project which was nominated in is it the 67th Grammy? The one that just, ended a couple of months back. February, was it February, March? By an artist called Antonio Vergara. He was nominated because I worked there, so naturally I get to be a part of that story and history. But unfortunately, the award went to Ruthie Foster, who's an amazing, phenomenal artist whose music I grew up on. In fact, I'm such a big fan of the album that she put out that just being a part of a project that was nominated in the same category just ticked all the boxes for me. And I'm indebted to Antonio for reaching out and believing that I brought a certain value to what he was doing, because he's a phenomenal artist, So yes, we have one in the bag.
Anyways, so what advice would you give to a young artist or producer?
Young artist or producer, find your voice, whatever that takes. Don't be scared to make mistakes. In fact, the earlier and the sooner you start making mistakes, the better it will be for you. We have a culture that frowns on making mistakes. But the human experience is full of ups and downs. And sometimes you do not learn what works, because what might work for Imam may not necessarily work for Kofi. You need to be somebody who thinks outside the peripheries of normalcy. There's a reason why sometimes some of the greatest artists almost say, that guy, normal. Because, it's a constant battle of trying to conform and breaking all forms of conformity. It's a lifelong pursuit. I don't want to sound woke, but it is what it is.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.